You are basically asking the Treasurer to keep JobKeeper going and actually joining the Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk with a letter to keep it going, which is probably the most surprising thing at the moment because we don't see a whole lot of that.
I'm asking for two things. One is for a recognition that there are specific areas and specific industries that are doing it very tough, and I would like to see the ability for those businesses just to have a little bit more cushioning. But there's another element to it, and that is I was calling on my Premier and the state government to start doing some heavy lifting, because that's been the missing part of this jigsaw puzzle, Pete. It's been all eyes on Canberra. It's been all about Canberra, and in Queensland, the government hasn't done very much at all. And I'll give you some figures that'll put it into perspective. The tourism support package through the airlines that the federal government put in place at the start of this month, that's worth about $50 per Australian. If you look at all of the assistance that's been announced from the state with voucher systems and support packages, it works out to be $1.16 per Queenslander. Now, I wanted to use this as an example to do two things. One is to show that I'll always back Queensland, and I think there is the ability to make a direct targeted package very specifically to allow that transition from the federal government. But the real task now lies with our state, and we have industries on their knees, and quite frankly, we've let them down, and I'm calling on the state government to step up to the plate, and that'd be the best example it could set for Canberra and everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, but wasn't it Queensland's hardline border and that position that prevented tourism industry in Queensland from filling that void with interstate travellers?
Pete, I'm going to look to the future, and I've said that my style as an opposition leader will be to hold the government to account. Where I see things are good, I'll call it. Where I see other opportunities, I'll do that as well. And right now, here's some things that the state government could be doing. One is infrastructure, fast track it, particularly in these regions, to create some jobs. The second is it's time for us to look at a targeted package directly to these businesses. That hasn't been the case. And in the case of Queensland, our support has been about a quarter of what Victoria and New South Wales has done. And I won't let the government off the hook, because whilst there are areas that are doing very well, and particularly those near the populated centres, I look at places like particularly Cairns, but also the Whitsundays and parts of the Gold Coast that have really relied on international tourism. They're doing it tough. And my style is not to whinge, my style is to have a win. And every time the Premier steps up and says, Canberra, 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 I say, yeah, absolutely. I'll always fight for more for Canberra. But what about doing the things that you control? And that's the point we made yesterday. We made it forcefully. We made it without fear or favour. And it's given us an opportunity to ask a little bit more from our level of government as well.
Yeah, OK. So just to be specific there, and Josh Frydenberg talks about this, the federal government has provided Queensland over the past 12 months with $28.5 billion. Meanwhile, from the state government, the state's only provided $8.5 billion, and that's over the next 4.5 years. So there's a lot more work that can be done from the state side of things rather than the federal side of things.
Yes, there is, Peter. And another sobering statistic is we went to the election and the state government said to us they'd be borrowing $4 billion extra. Turns out it was $28 billion. And despite that, the level of infrastructure spending in Queensland is rock bottom compared to other states. Our net worth as a state, despite that extra borrowing, barely moved. So what does that tell you? It says that we are borrowing in Queensland to keep the lights on. We're borrowing for day-to-day expenditure rather than borrowing to dream big and create those capital programs. So what I'm saying is, please, what's in the budget, bring it forward. Bring it forward and get cracking. Whether that be in areas that are really doing it tough or areas that are looking for that next wave to create the opportunity, bring that spending forward. And I would like to see a larger portion of our budget spent on building roads, building schools, creating opportunity, water infrastructure, new age agriculture technology. They're the sorts of things I want to see the budget unleash, not day-to-day expenditure.
Now, I'm sure you don't want to get Josh Frydenberg miffed, but Annastacia Palaszczuk, when she asked for the JobKeeper to be extended, Frydenberg accused her of grandstanding and petty politicking over that call. So wouldn't that just apply to you if you adopt the same position?
No, I've been respectful with what I've asked for, and I haven't shied away from the fact that I think Canberra have done the heavy lifting in this. Now, when I talk about extending JobKeeper, I'm talking specifically for those regions and those industries that are at rock bottom. And when I talk about that, I say, for example, I say marina fees and those people who are using the marina berths in a place like Cairns, where I spoke to a company the other day who were once running a dozen vessels 7 days a week, down to about 3 vessels 3 or 4 days a week. Now, that's a cliff. That's a real disaster. But I also want to see the state do a little bit more. They've got payroll tax deferral due on the 7th of April. They've got marina fees that are still in limbo whether or not they're going to be reviewed in the long term. These are real issues. So I'll never take a backward step in advocating, but I do it respectfully, and I don't ask for the world. I ask for what I think is fair and reasonable. But I also won't let our mob off the hook either. And I think this constant crying for Canberra and putting your arms up and saying you can't do anything, well, that's old age state government advocacy. I'll work on both fronts, and I hope that I'm showing that in the way I'm handling it.
OK, David Crisafulli, the opposition leader of Queensland. Appreciate your time this morning.